The content of this podcast is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended as, nor should it be considered a substitute for, professional medical advice.
Sweaty and pissed. Menopause makes me sweaty and pissed.
Well, welcome.
Yes.
Back with everybody on Sweaty and Pissed, Menopause and More.
Yes.
And I'm Leanne Morgan, comedian.
And Karen Nickell, nurse practitioner.
Brilliant nurse practitioner. Okay, we're going to talk about, I asked Karen if we could talk about this today, our bladders.
Bladder.
And bladder leakage. and how, why did... that was a sign that I knew my life was over. When I started wee-weeing on myself and then the odor. Yay. I thought if I had to get another man, if something were to happen to Chuck, God forbid.
Yeah.
And I had to get out of here and date. I thought, how am I going to do that at 50? I'm about to turn 53 with urine all over me. Is that too much is that too early to talk about that? But anyway, we were going to talk about bladder. That's a big deal for women.
Yeah. So, and there are a lot of reasons we have bladder issues as we age. Part of it is, the pelvic floor starts collapsing because Leanne, I wish you could see Leanne's face right now when you talk about collapsing pelvic floors.
Yeah,
but
that sounds horrible.
Yeah, and so the support for the bladder starts giving out, and so we don't empty as well. The sphincter gets weak.
And the sphincter, is that around your butthole? Is that over there?
No. It's at the it's at the end of the tube that comes from the bladder.
The ureter?
The urethra.
Urethra.
Right.
Oh yeah, the urethra's down.
Right. The ureters go from the kidney to the bladder.
Okay.
And then from the bladder out, that tube is the urethra, and at the bottom of that is a sphincter that you're supposed to be able to control. You open the sphincter to void.
Yeah. And
you can, stop and start the flow.
And that's always worked on me. But
that's good news.
But the Kegel, is it Kegel?
Kegel, yeah. Kegel exercises really help with strengthening that
you
pelvic
can hold
floor.
And okay. Mm-hmm. And we're supposed to be doing Kegel at the stop signs.
Yeah.
Or red lights.
Red light, every commercial, if you're a TV watcher, and if you watch commercials or, I guess now we can fast forward through them. So, but yeah, you need to do it several times a day for about a minute, 2 minutes at a time.
Do you do that?
Karen, I do.
You're disciplined about everything in your life.
No.
I just showed her my wallet.
Yeah.
I thought she was going to faint.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah. Then you can tell I don't do Kegels by looking at my wallet.
That wallet was pathologic for sure.
Yeah. A lot of receipts from being on the road doing comedy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do we do with that? I mean, you're not submitting them anywhere, right?
Well, I'm supposed to be taking them home. Chuck made a system for me because Chuck's type A. Mm-hmm. And he made a system for me where you have envelopes. And he said, you could even go the month of September, Leanne, and put your receipts in. He goes, that would really help me because he does my taxes, and it's awful what he has to go through.
Yeah.
Flights and all that, and I should be taking care of that. I'm doing better. But let's say that we started this menopause because I've lost my mind, and Karen's trying to save me. Yeah. And you have kept me alive. I've got to say you've kept me alive for the last 6 years, but and all that, I had brain fog, and I had all these horrible perimenopause, and I gave up, and I didn't have drive, and I didn't take care of my taxes. Or I paid my taxes. I don't mean that, but I mean, I threw it over onto somebody else.
Yeah.
I put that burden on somebody else. Chuck has had to carry a lot of burden.
I know.
But he will not talk about my bladder. Chuck has watched me birth 3 children. Mm. Yeah. 1 C-section, 2 vaginal. Yeah. And, he's signed the cords or cut them, and he said my uterus looked like a Cornish hen that time, and he cannot talk about my bladder. When I say Chuck, my bladder, and I'm embarrassed.
Yeah.
Intimately. And he goes, don't talk about that, ruin our marriage. So I'm trying to keep you on a pedestal.
Well, speaking of having children, that's another pelvic floor killer. Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the reasons our bladder starts sagging. Sometimes if you still have a uterus, the uterus can start sagging down. And then when women have a hysterectomy, that uterus is sort of structural in the pelvis. It sort of helps keep that bladder in its place. And so once women have a hysterectomy, the bladder tends to start falling. And that's why a lot of times when they do a hysterectomy, they'll go ahead and do a bladder tack at the same time.
Bladder tack? I've heard about the tack.
Yeah. So
they tack up the bladder.
They put a little sling on that baby, and it's like a little bladder hammock.
Oh.
Yeah. And tack it to the bone.
So if I don't have to have a hysterectomy, which I don't,
yeah,
and I'm fine, should I go in and get a bladder tack?
The only thing I would say about that surgery is, in my clinical experience, a lot of times there's failure after a few years where you're sort of back to square one. So
good Lord.
I'm not saying people shouldn't do it, but it's a consideration. One thing that we can do to keep the bladder propped up, besides Kegels, keeping your pelvic floor strong, is to use a pessary, which is a rubber device that you insert vaginally that just sort of props up the bladder and can prop up the rectum if it's falling in.
Good Lord. Does it stay in all the time?
No. Well, there are some that are much more structural that you leave in, and like I have women come in and I take it out, clean it, reinsert it. But there are many, like the ring pessary, you can remove and clean and replace yourself.
Oh, Lord.
And now there's an over-the-counter product called Poise Impressa that's sort of like a tampon, but it's not absorbable because we already are struggling with dry vaginas, which we'll talk at another time. So you don't want to stick anything up there that's going to
that you got to pull
moisture
out. And take your vagina with it.
Yeah, that's going to take moisture from that area because we're already sort of struggling with that. So
yes.
Anyway, so it's easy to insert because it has an applicator and it has a string that you can use to remove it. So it's a disposable pessary of sorts. And that's a good thing to try and see if that helps. And then you can always be fitted for a reusable pessary.
Oh,
which is much more.
I had to. I just went boom. There was a gnat or something. Okay, so let me ask you this about bladder. Somebody told me that, and it was somebody that was not in the medical field. It was me talking on the phone to one of my friends who's leaking a lot of fluid.
Yeah.
All right, she said that it is related to a part of your brain that controls your bladder, that if you're not getting enough sleep, that you leak more urine. And I notice there's times when I'm not leaking as much as I go through a spell where I think, good Lord, what has happened to me? And I'm leaking a lot. And then other times where I don't. And I've wondered, is that when I'm getting sleep, I
mean, that could help. I mean, getting rest and resting your body helps everything, but a lot of it is a structural issue
for women that have had kids.
And then the other thing that happens in menopausal women is if you are not on estrogen replacement and you don't have estrogen in the vaginal area, those walls get really thin and weak. Mm-hmm. And so a full bladder leaning on that vaginal wall makes it droop into, lean into the vaginal area. So, And also the sphincter gets weaker when there's not estrogen there. The bladder tends to spasm more. So a lot of women in menopause will get, they think they're getting a bladder infection because they're having this pain.
Yes, and you remember I just had that where I said to you, do I have a bladder infection? Because I had a little, not urgency, but some burning.
Yeah.
And you said, you checked my urine and I didn't have any infection. And you said it's menopause. And you got me these pellets.
Yes.
That I have to insert myself, which let me say, it's gross, Karen.
Well,
that I have to shove that up in there.
Oh.
I'm not a medical person, and I'm very sissy, and everything makes me feel like I'm going to vomit. But anyway, I put them up in there. I didn't want Chuck to know anything, because if he thinks that I'm in there doing something, that means something, and it doesn't. But anyway, I did use it, and that really helped.
Yeah. So adding some vaginal estrogen can really, really help the pelvic floor, the vaginal walls, the bladder. Everything just works better when there's estrogen on board. So using the other thing that helps with that vaginal estrogen can help with is just keeping the vaginal area healthy. We have fewer vaginal infections, fewer urinary tract infections when we use vaginal estrogen for menopausal women.
And how do we keep the vaginal area
healthy? Well, one is the vaginal estrogen, and that can come in many forms. There's manufactured products like Estrace vaginal cream, which actually is fairly recently gone generic. So it's estradiol vaginal cream. Premarin makes a vaginal cream. And then there is a product called Vagifem, and there is also a generic version of this, which is a little estradiol tablet on the end of a one-time use applicator. And you just sort of are
like you would a yeast
pushing
infection.
that. Yeah. You're just sort of popping that little estradiol tab into the vaginal area. And then for compounded options, we can do, again, the creams, either estradiol or estriol. And one thing I do is something called a triturate. That's the little pellet you're talking about. It's about the size of a Tic Tac.
Yes.
And it's just a little pellet that's dissolvable that you just pop in there. So it's not messy. It's not. It's easy to do for most people.
For most people are not sissy.
Sissy, yeah.
It's fine. I can make it. Yeah. It's just fun. Back when I was having a bunch of kids, I was used to suffering. And then I didn't, I had to do all kinds of horrible things. And now I don't. I had a long break. And now I'm touching my vagina again. Yeah, it's hard.
You had a low maintenance period, and now
I really did.
You're back to maintaining.
I'm back to doing all a bunch of stuff around that area. It's bizarre. Okay, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
And I know this is probably getting too personal, and your baby's in here, Forrest, who we love, and is the smartest thing, and I could not do this podcast without Forrest.
I know.
So, because when I asked you if you want to do a podcast, if you and I had to go find somebody, I'd lay in the bed and watch Ozark on Netflix, and I would have never done anything. So thank goodness for him.
Considering this morning we were lucky to get to the right floor in the building.
I know we forgot what floor it was. But we did empty our bladder.
Yes, we did.
Okay. So, when women, do you find that women, if they use these over-the-counter products that I don't even know what they're called, but like things to wash and do.
Oh.
Is that stay away from that?
Yeah, that's not good. The problem is you're flushing out your good bacteria. You have good bacteria in the vaginal area that fights off or
horrible thing.
Yeah, competes with the bad bacteria and yeast. So when you have good bacteria present, you're going to have far fewer infections. But if you're washing that away, not good.
Plus, if you fragrance is not good.
Yeah,
any kind of product with fragrance.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to use if you want a non-hormonal option for moisturizer and pH balancing, there's an over-the-counter product called Replens that is a vaginal product that you insert 2-3 times weekly, and it just moisturizes the vaginal area, keeps the pH healthy, so that the good bacteria can thrive because it likes a certain pH. And then there's another product that is not a moisturizer, but just a pH balancer, and that's Refresh, and that's made by the same company. They also make a product called Pro-B, which is a probiotic for vaginal health. So it replaces
Wow.
so it replaces the vaginal good bacteria.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah. So there are a lot of things and the other thing that's not a pH balancer, but that can provide moisture. Now, it doesn't strengthen the vaginal walls or anything like that, but you can just use coconut oil. Put a dab or more than a dab, a blob on your finger, whatever measurement that is. But, the size of a quarter or so, and just insert that with your finger. You can use that for moisturizing.
Yeah. That's what it's come to. Yeah. But I've got a big old jar of coconut oil that I don't keep by the bed because it scares my kids. Yeah. Because they still come home and we're, setting up in the bed. We've got a big TV up and when we shouldn't. Yeah. And we're going to do an episode on sleep, and I'm doing everything wrong. Yeah. I do everything wrong though. I'm finding out through this podcast, but they come home and we're watching whatever, our shows, and with the dogs in the bed. And I had to get that big jar of coconut and take it somewhere else because they were like, what is happening? What is going on here?
We don't want to know that reality.
We don't want to know that. And I went, you don't want to know, but that's how tuition's being paid. All kinds of mama's doing all I can. If you're wondering where that highlight comes from. But don't ask me for eyelash extensions. I'm not able to do enough for that. That's so expensive. Okay, so again about the bladder. So what else do we need to know, my little Karen?
Well, certainly if you're having a big change in any bladder symptoms, that needs to get checked out and make sure you don't have an infection. If you're doing fine and then all of a sudden you're leaking all the time, that's
leaking. Yeah. Is there any other symptoms?
Oh, for
anybody
infection?
Needs to watch, or for anything funky.
Oh,
anything dangerous? Anything about bladder? Anything else?
Oh, well, certainly if you're seeing blood in the urine, need to know about that. Can't empty your bladder, need to know about that.
Okay, let me ask you this.
Burning, frequency, urgency, you're having to get up, say most of the time you sleep through the night and then all of a sudden you're having to get up 3 and 4 times a night to go to void, then that's also something that needs to get checked out.
Yeah. When I just did a show for ovarian cancer researched, and they talked about the symptoms and that sometimes you feel like you can't empty, whether that's shoo or your bladder, that you don't feel like you're fully emptied.
Right.
But that's not exactly a sign of ovarian. I'm just saying that is.
Yeah, that's why those things need to be checked, especially if it's a big change in habits.
Any big change in habits.
Yeah. And, there's other signs that aren't related to the bladder, but need to be checked out. Like if you're having urine that looks like Coca-Cola, that color, that needs to get checked out. So, I think most people would look at that and go, oh, that can't be right, and get into the doctor. But, some
people can't deal with it, can they?
So that you need to just make an appointment if that's happening. So,
okay, there was something else I was going to ask you, but I've got brain fog. About the bladder. Oh, we didn't know each other then, but when I was at UT in school, I kept having these terrible, growing up, when I was born, my mama said, in my diaper when I was a newborn baby, my urine was like Coca-Cola. And she would say to the pediatrician, shouldn't we? And he goes, well, she needs to quit drinking so many Coca-Colas. And Mama said, you weren't drinking Coca-Colas. But nobody, anyway. So fast forward, I get to UT. I start having these terrible pains, and they say, oh, you've probably got stones. I didn't. I went through a bunch of different doctors. Anyway, I ended up, some little guy in Nashville found it, and I was born with a birth defect, and my urethra was twisted up and had never functioned. I mean, like, urine couldn't go down through it. So my right kidney was twice the size as it should have been. I turned yellow. I looked jaundiced, and then the guy in Nashville goes, okay, she has to have surgery. And they scheduled it and did it, and I've been fine ever since. But they put an artificial tube in.
Mm-hmm.
It was now. What am I saying?
It was
a
the
ureter.
Yeah,
My
right,
ureter, right? Ureter was twisted up, couldn't drain that urine. So I've had. That's what that scar is on this side. You've seen my body, but anyway, I've been fine ever since until now. And I don't have bad symptoms, but
Yeah.
I did think I had a bladder infection for the first time in a long time.
Right.
And called you. And it was menopause. It was all these other goings on.
I know. And it's a common problem. That's why there are so many products to deal with.
We got so tickled. Tell them about the panties.
Yeah. So we have, just like we have wicking bras for all our sweating, there are whole lines of underwear that have absorbable crotch area, and it can. I was saying to Leanne this morning, I think they can absorb like 2 cups of water, but I that's not correct. But
probably 2 tablespoons.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say. But can you imagine being at a UT ball game and sloshing around in that? If it were 2 cups. But my friend uses them, and she loves them.
Yeah.
And she says, also, I know that I hope Forrest isn't listening, but it helps with odor.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to go around and people go, what is that? That's Leanne. Oh, my goodness. Well, don't forget this. We have to do a shout out to Amy from Clarksville.
Amy.
On our Facebook page, Sweaty and Pissed.
.com. Oh, no.
Yeah, it's our website,
That's our website.
sweatyandpissed.com, and our Facebook is Sweaty and Pissed.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet Amy sent a message to us telling us how many little children she'd had and all the horror she'd been through.
They're 10, 7, and 3 years old.
And don't you know she's tired in a pickup line?
Tired.
God love her. And she's probably making sheet pans of chicken and French fries for little children.
Tater tots.
And it's got a crock pot going, and I bet you somebody's got practice somewhere.
Yep.
Those years, I thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
And I loved it. Don't get me wrong. I wish I'd had 10 more kids, but you just stay in a car, going and a-doing. I know. And then all of a sudden it ends. Sweet Amy, and then you won't have anybody to take anywhere. They'll all start driving, and then you'll sit in your gown and watch Today's Show till noon, and you'll stop exercising. Don't do that, Amy. Don't do what I did.
Yeah, but we appreciate her comments. And,
I know. And people, if you're out there and you like us, I need words of affirmation. I don't think Karen does. But anyway, we would like for you to message us.
Yeah. And if you do, we can give you a shout out on our podcast.
I know.
See?
And so you can go to sweatypiss.com and you can go to leannemorgan.com, and I've got the podcast on there where you can click on and find out where to go, but you can on Sweaty and Piss. We're going to start adding a lot of content to our website. Karen's going to give everybody
reading list
references, to where to go, reading list, and maybe we'll find some good panties that hold a lot of liquid.
Yeah,
and put a link up.
Yeah, put that link on, and link maybe to the Poison Pressa.
Yes, to the little things that don't pull your vagina out. And if you do listen to our podcast, would you please rate us? Give us 5 stars.
5. Yes,
5 is what we'd like to have.
Yeah.
But we are so tickled. I've been all over the country working and doing shows, and I was in Indiana, and these darling women came up and said, we've been listening to the podcast. Oh, and how many women have I had to say to me, I'm going to watch it, Leanne? I go, you can't watch it. You got to listen to it. And they go, how? So I've had to help people on the street find their podcast button on their phone.
Well, and we're not so good at that either. But
No,
the fact
I didn't know what I was doing.
We're good enough that we can teach people now.
And I'm so thankful. But my kids had to teach me, and then Forrest has had to teach us a lot of stuff. So anyway, okay, so I guess we're ready to roll up for today, but that's been fun talking about our bladder.
Completely enjoyable.
Thank you
Loved
for telling
it.
me.
Loved it. And maybe we need to work on some stuff that's still a problem for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get that.
And
worked
I'll
out.
be doing my Kegels. I'm doing them right now. Okay.
See you next time.
See you next time.